Jacksonville, the child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. Poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
From WBRN Radio, traveling on the Boston Red Network, the week that was, on the 14th of December 2019. This past week we saw the articles of impeachment being introduced, debated in the House of Representatives, and finally moved from the Judiciary Committee. Next week the full House will take on these articles. There are two basic articles there that cover obstruction of Congress, basically, and the Trump position in terms of subverting the processes of government. Effectively, that's what it is. Now, they did want to, there was some talk of putting in bribery, that is, in the Constitution, but they'll leave that out and just leave it pretty simple. The two open-ended reasons given for the impeachment, they'll debate that. There's some concern, as there normally is, about some of the Democrats elected in 2018. Will they be vulnerable to the impeachment process itself? And we think of people like Connor Lamb in Pennsylvania. He's an ex-military type. Some of these people are ex-military types, ex-CIA types, etc., that have those kinds of background that pushes off. They're presenting this as the quote-unquote patriotic thing to do, a mission to fulfill the Constitution. Period. Now, on constitutional grounds, if a representative pushes that forward, and these representatives are pushing that forward, it's a matter of conviction, and that is the reason they are voting for impeachment. Now, on the other side, Uncle Carl was arguing in his little headline here. Let me just fly over here very quickly to Uncle Carl and his argument about he was traveling around the country, and what did he see? He said independents are impeachment skeptics. Well, the polling has constantly shown that independents are not as engaged in the impeachment process as are Republicans and Democrats. Now, you're going to have that. If we look back at the history of the Tricky Dicky impeachment, we'll call it, it took a long time. It was that process went on for about a year before people started to get in touch with it. Of course, we didn't have as many posters. We had Gallup, we had Harris there, and I believe in Ropa was around. Anyway, there were not that many posters, but people started to look to it, and even after Tricky left on his way back to California, there was still a considerable amount of people did not feel at the time that he should be impeached. So what that basically tells us is it's not a repeating of history. It is that just people really don't understand the impeachment process. Now, it's been done on Andrew Johnson. That was a different situation. Johnson literally destroyed Reconstruction, and he was saved by one vote in the Senate. Literally one vote. That was Andrew Johnson. The President Johnson. The first President Johnson, if you want to look at that part of history. And then, of course, there was Tricky Dick. And the more modern rendition of that was William James Jefferson Clinton in his impeachment in 1998. Now, that was different. That was revolved around an affair with an intern, Monica Lewinsky, and he did give a deposition to a grand jury, and they said, well, he perjured himself there, and of course that would be grounds to impeach him. But it went nowhere. The House at that time was under Newt Gingrich, and it went to the Senate, and the Democrats sat in the Senate. Now, the function of the Senate, they're supposed to be the jury there, and of course the House managers went up there and presented the evidence that they had against President Clinton, and President Clinton was acquitted and left office with very high numbers. Now, he'd run for re-election in 1996, and the candidate was Bob Dole. And of course, he beat Bob Dole. There was no problem about that at all. And Clinton left in a time that the economy was doing well. In 1998, we had a dot-com boom. The next recession would come after the 2000 election that was stolen, Albert Gore of Tennessee, by G.W. Bush. And of course, G.W. came in with a recession, and G.W. was literally saved by infusion of spending on national security. Homeland Security was created due to the 9/11 situation there in New York. And that pretty much kept the economy going. G.W. would then, in 2004, run for re-election. Of course, he was re-elected on some shenanigans in Ohio against Brother John Kerry of Massachusetts. Anyway, that is how the political clock ticked, as they say, along. And of course, that debate will be ongoing, and we won't know till this time next year what will actually happen in terms of its effect. Will it spur turnout by Republicans and other zealots that would come out, conspiracy theorists, etc., etc.? Can they expand their base? And this whole thing revolves around a matter of demographics. That's the reason that you see a number of laws. In fact, in Wisconsin, they are purging roughly, 200,000 people from the voting rolls there, and the state government under the Democratic governor there, Tommy, what's his name, wanted to wait till 2021 to address those voter rolls. Now, they do have same-day registration in Wisconsin, so progressive people there have to be mindful of that. And one of the interesting dynamics of this whole election process, since we've had these very stringent identification laws since 9/11, and they put that in there that people did not have valid IDs at the time. Now, younger people that were born in the 2000 election that Albert Gore stole from Albert Gore, they all have a proper ID. So the Bernie Sanders people have proper ID, and by extension, the 20-somethings, 30-somethings, and 40-somethings are pretty much there. Now, where there's some patchy situations involving the 60s plus people over 60, some of the senior citizens have to take care of that. And there's also a matter of some people that, for whatever reason, move around. Say, for instance, you left your home and moved to assisted living, whatever, you would then, of course, have a new address, and that would have to be taken care of. And a lot of seniors, especially in the 70s and 80s, do not drive anymore. They live in cities like many of us. There's no reason to drive, and if you did, there'd be a hell of a reason to try and find parking. So, in other words, those are some of the modern-day situations that come up, and those issues have to be addressed, and they are being addressed now. And, of course, the time to address those issues is in January before the Iowa caucus to make sure those ID situations are taken care of, are litigated. In many instances, they'll be litigated. And in Wisconsin, there'll be obviously big voter registration drives. The Republicans even have their own voter registration drives. But to close out the part about independents and as being impeachment skeptics, well, there's no doubt that skepticism is out there. But overall, the independents, if in the 2018 cycle was and this would depend obviously on state, there would gravitate many of them towards the Democratic candidate, particularly the so-called moderate Democratic candidates. Many of these independents are actually conservatives, or perhaps some moderate conservatives. What do you want to label them? It's more of a quibbling when you get around to trying to label these people as to where they actually are in the political scheme of things. And you'll hear more of that. And the talk out of the committee, at least by old man McConnell on the Republican part, they'll start next year. They will make it short and quote-unquote sweet. In other words, they will have few witnesses, if any, on their side, and the Democrats will present their case, and they want to wrap it up in perhaps 2 weeks or so, to get it all wrapped up, put the bow tie on it, and move on to other matters, quite literally. And on the trade side, there's a talk of what they call a phase 2. It's a light trade agreement where China agrees to buy more agricultural products. Of course, they'll be buying pork because of the problems in China. And at the same time, they will look at some licensing matters for tech, but that has not come out yet. And the tariffs scheduled to go on this weekend will not appear. That will be a definite situation there. So that is one, I suppose you'd say, relief valve point there on that the tariff situation. That creates a lot of artificiality in the economy. And no doubt some of those districts that voted for DJ Trump are suffering. But once again, we're talking about commodities, and commodities, of course, go up and go down. There's not any given situation there as to where that will go or will not go. And we also have the budget. That's $1.37. I don't have my cheat sheet here. $1 trillion budget that Nancy Pelosi announced on a day that she also announced the impeachment process for DJ Trump. But that will be taken care of before literally the 20th, I believe, of September, that the government would run out of funds. And that will go to the next fiscal year, and in that will be, of course, taken care of. And then you'll have 2021. The administration, we don't know who the administration will be, depending on where that ball falls there. And in the UK, the Brexit election there, the Tory party, I believe, gained about 47 seats from what they had, and they needed 326 to govern. So they effectively are governing. The Lib Dems leader lost her seat, and they were wiped out. Now that is the Liberal Party in the UK. And the basic Social Democratic Party, the left party, is Labour. And Labour, I believe, got like 199 or somewhere there. Labour lost a significant number of seats also. there, and part of the problem was, and it's still being evaluated as to part of what happened. One was the UK British election process was more Americanized, with a simple slogan like America First, but it was just get Brexit done. And they voted for a scoundrel named Boris Johnson, whom people did not like. And at the same time, the monopoly press, corporate press in the UK, villainized Jeremy Corbyn, and they threw everything at him but the kitchen sink. And the Labour manifesto was very progressive. It called for the nationalization of things like the mail service and the promise of broadband all over England to be paid out of the tax coffers. So these were, and also taking care of the National Healthcare Service. In the UK, they have a National Healthcare Service that not only covers doctors, nurses, medical personnel, but they own the medical facilities. And now heading back to this new, after the Brexit is over, now it'll take a 1-year transition period. After the Brexit is in that 1-year transition period and it's over, the U.S. would like to do a quote-unquote trade deal. They call it free. It's not free. But nonetheless, to try to get their dirty little pharmaceuticals into the U.K., which will increase costs. Now, the Tories have 5 years in the U.K. It's different unless there's a situation, no confidence, etc. It's parliamentary. But we'll see. And there's some talk now, well, this Boris Johnson so-called landslide, they keep changing that. They said, well, this is the most significant election in the UK since the Great Patriotic War ended in 1945. Now they're down to 30-something years, and before it's over, it'll be 20-something years there. But a lot of this is spin doctors at work in the UK. But the people that were in the Midlands and in the north of England, working class areas, they voted Tory, and now they're saying, well, we just lent our vote to the Tories to see what Tories can do. A very big mistake. They were devastated under Margaret Thatcher. So once again, they fell for this, as did working class districts in the U.S. With DJ Trump, in places like Pennsylvania, West Virginia, the Appalachian parts of Ohio, and then across the Southland. And then you get into these industrial states. It used to be like Wisconsin, almost Minnesota, not quite Minnesota, and Michigan, the home of the UAW. And this just did not happen overnight. There was a massive militia anti-right-wing movement in Michigan. And of course, that's the home of Michael Moore, and Michael Moore is out of Flint. And his uncle worked in the automobile industry. And if you can utilize these people on any issue in the UK, the Brexit was on immigration, the idea of people coming in from the EU that had skills, and some people in the UK did not, and then some job displacement. Totally different situation than in the US. In the US, immigration takes two forms: a labor that's semi or unskilled, and people that come that are skilled and go immediately in the so-called tech economy and whatever else. So that is the primary difference there, but the same animus is there. This immigration is there, nationalism, the national chauvinism, sexism, racism, they're all at work, and they were at work there. Anyway, now let's finish him up, and we'll go and start the polling here. Then we'll look at Joe Biden's firewall, South Carolina, and how Joe Biden is doing in South Carolina. Very interesting story there. One of the lessons learned here, key points, I suppose, is you start out up 20 points. Normally on any modern campaign, you will not remain in 20 points. So you will thus come down to reality. The race is in itself a tightening up there in South Carolina. Latest polling here. Now we'll go over these polls, what we have. and then we'll deep dive into South Carolina. And this is the Real Clear Politics, just the polls that are listed here. The poll, the Post and Courier, that is out of South Carolina. It has Joe Lunchbox Biden at 27. He's up by 7 over Bernie Sanders at 20. Then we have Liz Warren of the Commonwealth. And in the single-digit racket there is the mayor from South Bend at 9. Amy Klobuchar has 5. As Senator Booker has 3. Mr. Yang at 5. And interesting here, Tulsi Gabbard is at 4. She is in the lower middle single digits. Amy Klobuchar at 2. She hasn't spent much time there. And our own Devon Patrick at 1, and Marianne Williamson is Hunt. That was on Friday, and we have in the California race there, Biden is up by 1. Fairly close race in California between the quote-unquote what's called the top 3. He's at 21. Bernie has 20, and Liz Warren at 23. We have in South Bend at 9. Mr. Yang has 6. That's in California. Bloomberg is at 5. He moved up just on the power of commercials. Amy Klobuchar has 2. And again, Tulsi Gabbard at 2. That's the California primary. And now we dove into Texas. And seeing the polling from Texas, this is CNN. Biden has 35 there. And Bernie has 15. Liz Warren 13. Me of South Bend at 9. Again, Bloomberg appears at 5. Just on the power of his advertising there. Julian Castro at 3. And Yang at 3, Tulsi Gabbard at 1, Senator Booker at 2. That is in the state of Texas. Now, Bernie has been doing quite a bit of campaigning in Texas, and we'll see how that works out. But Joe Biden is the only one. He's up by 20 points. Out of the state of Wisconsin, this is Marquette University here, Marquette. Joe Biden is at 23. Bernie is at 19. Liz Warren at 16. They're all pretty much bunched up together here. Mayor South being at 15. Bloomberg so far is at 3. He will go up. Senator Booker is at 4. Yang is at 3. And Amy Klobuchar from next door is at 3 also. And Tulsi Gabbard is at 1. Now these are some matchups here out of the state of Wisconsin. And what do we have here? Biden is up by 1. Very close race in Wisconsin, at least to now. And he's 47-46. Bernie is behind by 2. DJ Trump has 47, and Bernie has 45. Still very close there. He's actually, that is a point up. And over Liz Warren, he's up by, this is DJ Trump by 1. Same thing with Buttigieg, 43-44. And with Senator Booker, that's kind of interesting there. A 1-point race, DJ Trump up by 1. And with the Biden matchup here, DJ Trump is leading Biden by 1. That is in Wisconsin. Now we go to CNN, Texas. Of course, you would expect DJ Trump to be ahead in the state of Texas. He only leads Biden, according to CNN, by 1 point. Bernie Sanders, Trump leads by 7. Same with Liz Warren, and the same with the South Bend mayor. And of course, out in California, Biden is up by 20 points over DJ Trump. Bernie by 16, Liz Warren by 16. Actually, Buttigieg by 17 in California. And prior to that, we'll just go ahead and do this. We'll put the Emerson poll. We went through it. Biden is up by 1 in that poll. Bernie's at 22 there, and then Buttigieg. And Liz Warren is at 12. That's the Emerson poll of Iowa. Amy Klobuchar is at 10. She's finally got into the double figures. We expect her to do better as she moves along. Bloomberg and Tulsi Gabbard are both at 2. Senator Booker is at 4 in there. And in New Hampshire, that was a poll that was done on the 11th that had Buttigieg up by 1. has 18. Bernie Sanders at 17 there in that poll. Get a run in that direction. So basically, these polls are just basically just telling us that the races are still close and very, very fluid, and we expect these races to remain very fluid as we move along here. Anyway, enough of this. Let's go to South Carolina, and that is the so-called firewall state. Yeah, the headline here is Biden, South Carolina firewall in danger. 2020 frontrunner shrinks to new low. Not the kind of headline the Biden people would want to see, but still, it is fluid. And he's got a 7-point lead here. Joe Biden might need to check his firewall. Former Vice President leads in South Carolina keeps shrinking. That's Sports Security change poll 2020 there. Even after key competition in the Polento state, Kamala Harris dropped out. The latest poll release shows him with a 7-point lead. Likely voters, the first in the South. That's Curry and Chance Research there. This poll, we've seen their polls before. Most consider South Carolina a must-win for Biden, no doubt about it. If he stumbles in Iowa and in New Hampshire, he led the race in May by 31 points. That's because of his name recognition. Aided by voters under 50, Bernie Sanders is continuing his recent national surge in South Carolina, where he has surpassed Liz Warren for second place. Most curious poll, he's added 7 points to pass Warren, whose backing was unchanged. It has risen in an early voting state, Thanksgiving, where he became a leader in New Hampshire, and second in Iowa. This is Bernie. And Bernie has a good organization. He had a good organization there in 2006. And these are some other things here. But once again, separated from the next group of challenged by South Bend's Mayor Pete, despite early success in early states, can't find support with African Americans. In Iowa, he's a leader there in some polls, second in New Hampshire. Has 3% of the followers of O.J. Simpson there. Overall, he gets 9% of the vote, followed by Senator Booker of Jersey and the businessman Tom Sear. They have 5%, and Tulsi Gabbard, she's got 4% in South Carolina. She's doing very well for someone not recognized. There's a lot of talk, will she go green or what she'll do. She's not running for the House next year. We don't know exactly where that will fall. Steyer has flooded South Carolina with TV and online ads. Gabbard has billboards across the state. The latest entrance into the race showed up in new polls. That is Bloomberg and Patrick. He has 3 and has 1. And, of course, Bloomberg will not even campaign there. He's going to Super Tuesday. Harris dropped out of the race after investing. She did invest heavily in South Carolina. Both Harris and Warren gained a large amount of support from African-American females. With Harris' departure, each gained 11 points. Biden leads 41 to 25% for Warren. Amongst key factors, the former vice president leads all African-American voters at 37%, but his advantage is slipping. Warren posted strong gains since the October poll to stand at 25%. Bernie is third at 16%. And Joe Lunchbox Biden in October led by the African-American vote by 21 points. Booker is betting on a good showing in South Carolina, gaining overall support, but unchanged with African women. Hadn't sold that deal. This is a very small poll of 300 and excuse me, 392 likely Democrats was taken to the 6 to 11 with a margin of error of 4.9, fairly large. So in other words, much work to be done in the state of South Carolina. Let's take a look at an academic issue here. And this is the Trump executive order. Oops. And it covers anti-Semitism on college campuses. That leaked also into the election in the UK. This is by Jared Kushner. He was writing. He's a senior advisor to the president. With an executive order, he made clear that anti-Semitism is not to be tolerated. This is from the New York Times, where he was writing. President Trump at a Hanukkah reception at the White House. The poison of anti-Semitism spread with dangerous violence throughout Europe, the Middle East, and even here at home. Most recently, horrific attack in Jersey City. On Wednesday, the president signed an executive order. I have to update this because it's already signed. Combating rising anti-Semitism. This is on college campuses. As a grandchild of a Holocaust survivor, I understand the horrors of anti-Semitism, and I could not be more proud of the president on this new policy. Well, we'll explore this policy here. According to the Anti-Defamation League, anti-Semitic incidents have been rising in the U.S. since 2013. Students in particular continue to face anti-Semitic harassment in schools and colleges. The president, and then this is where it is in here, will make it clear that Title VI of the Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination based on race, color, national origin, covers Jews. The order, the president takes critical action to support and defend Jewish students in the U.S. And when the news of the impending executive, this has been pushed around, were leaked, many rushed to criticize it without understanding its purpose. The order does not define Jews as a nationality. It merely says that to the extent that Jews are discriminated against for ethnic, racial, or national characteristics, they are entitled to protection of anti-discrimination laws. Now we're going to get some interesting byproduct on this. And the definition here of anti-Semitism, the language put forward in 2016 by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, also accounts for other forms of anti-Semitism. For example, the alliance defines the targeting of the State of Israel, conceived as a Jewish collectivity, and those who deny the Jewish people their right to self-determination, that is, claiming that the existence of the State of Israel is a racist endeavor, are those who compare contemporary Israeli policy to Nazis as examples of anti-Semitism. Remembrance Alliance, I'm not sure who they are, definitions make clear what the administration has stated publicly and on the record. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. This is an issue that people in the progressive community like myself vehemently disagree with. The inclusion of language with contemporary examples give critical guidance to agencies enforcing Title VI. Anti-Semites have grown increasingly brazen in claiming that attacks on Israel, even on Jewish students who may or may not support Israel, are not anti-Semitic. It's become fashionable amongst Jew haters to characterize any discriminatory behavior, no matter how lofty, not as a criticism of Jews but of Israel. He claims it's a lie. We claim he's a liar, especially on college campuses where discrimination, harassment, and intimidation of Jewish students have become commonplace and is routine. But he doesn't talk about what happened in Charlottesville with fascist types. And let me finish this up here. This administration committing to open debate and pursuit of truth on our nation's campuses is unwavering. In enforcing Title VI against a wide spectrum of prohibited discrimination, government agencies will continue to respect the free flow of ideas, even though they are detestable. when the president addressed the UN on the issue of the Iranian leadership, repeatedly called for destruction of the Jewish state. He made clear that Americans will never tolerate anti-Semitic hate and signed the order. And this is pushing for the order here. So this is a letter to the editor. Now let's go to the Jerusalem Post for there. This is the Jerusalem Post here. Trump signs executive order to fight anti-Semitism on U.S. campuses is the headline here. And this is by Jaffe Hoffman. And I want to try to Ore Nemethis. It's on the 12th of December when this was pinned. Okay, specifically the order is aimed at federally funded universities and colleges and require the Department of Education when reviewing whether there is a violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to consider this a widely accepted definition of anti-Semitism as part of its assessment on whether an incident or an activity may be anti-Semitic. As such, according to the explanation of the EO provided by the Anti-Definition League, criticism of Israel could be considered anti-Semitic if it becomes intentional, unlawful, discriminatory, intimidation, or harassment against Jews. And this is the same definition, a central perception of Jews which may be expressed as hate towards Jews, a rhetorical and physical manifestation of anti-Semitism directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards the Jewish community, institution, religious facilities. Title 6 prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in programs and activities receiving financial assistance. The Department of Education can cut federal funding for institutions that fail to remedy anti-Semitic incidents that fall under the title. Now, that title was written, most of the language, by the late Congressman from Harlem, Adam Clayton Powell. A senior administration official told Jerusalem Post on Tuesday that anti-Semitism on campus is often headed as an anti-Israeli agenda. If campuses that receive money from the government adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism in the cause of discrimination, students will feel that they are being bullied on campuses, on college campuses, should be able to complain to the administration there. Well, there's no doubt there's a lot of complaints going around. We begin to focus on issues in the late winter and spring when we were alarmed, frankly, that this would be after Charlottesville and the murder of Heber, who was a European, incidentally. We looked at the data and we saw there's a rise in anti-Semitic incidents, no doubt about that. If you go to any conspiracy theorists, Holocaust deniers, we had them over at Blog Talk, and they're all over the place, especially coming out of the former USSR satellite states, Estonia, Ukraine, where fascists roam there. The process to physically figure out what we could do on the subject. A second official explained to the Post that the policy of the executive branches to enforce Title VI in order to prohibit discrimination rooted in anti-Semitism as vigorously as against any other form of discrimination. They'll be very busy. For years, the Department of Education has said Title VI meant to protect students of all religions, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Sheiks, Buddhists, and others, and hopefully atheists too. We're not a religion. Majority of Jewish community celebrated Trump's announcement. The Republican Coalition National Chair Norm Coleman called the move truly historic. This is sort of putting out a fire that the Trump people started. There's nothing inconsistent with protecting freedom of expression and providing Jews the same protections according to other minorities. The ADL, too, said that in a climate of rising anti-Semitism, this order provides valuable guidance on anti-Semitism, giving law enforcement campus officials an important additional tool to help identify and fight this peculiar hate. Well, a lot of hate there, no doubt about that. It also reaffirms protection of Jews under Title V without infringing on the First Amendment rights. These are important steps. The Orthodox Union applauded the EQ and said it hopes that now those who seek to use academic institutions to place to stroke anti-Semitism are on notice. The Israeli Foreign Minister Katz urged more companies to adopt similar measures. Christian supporters of Israel and Trump also. And this is where there's a big schism between the right wing and it's seen as a right wing. Thousands of MPs around the world, including many evangelical Christians, also stress how much the president has done. This is a campaign announcement here. Dr. Mike Evans, a member of the president's faith advisory team, explained that the core issues in the Palestinian peace process and in Iran's terrorist obsession with Israel is anti-Semitic. Yes, he'd know. Jews in Israel are not killed over land. They are killed because they are Jews. That's an absolute lie there. Anyway, the Jewish Democratic Council of America's executive director, Safia, instead attacked the president, saying he is partially responsible for the rise in anti-Semitism in America. Therefore, just 3 days after he characterized Jews as money-hungry killers, the president has zero credibility there, and that sums up our issue on DJ Trump. Safia said that if Trump truly wanted to combat anti-Semitism, he would expect responsibility his role in perpetrating anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and emboldening white nationalism. He said it before and he'll say it again. Trump is the biggest threat to American Jews, she continued, taking criticism one step forward. Jay Steele, president of the Jeremy Ben added, this executive order, like the stalled congressional legislation, is based on appearances designed less to combat anti-Semitism than to have a chilling effect on free speech and trap down on campus critics. He explained that experts who drafted the definition of anti-Semitism that is being adopted by the executive order, Kenneth Stern, had opposed the application on a college campus. Stern wrote in a New York Times op-ed, if this bill became law, students and faculty members would be scared into silence, and administrators would err on the side of suppressing or censoring a speech. And Mr. Stern should be remembered here. Ben Amin said that the same right-wing groups who turn a blind eye to the president's hate rhetoric have promoted this executive order as part of a cynical push to turn the issue of anti-Semitism into partisan political weapon instead of seriously combating it in all forms. As expected, pro-Palestinian organizations expressed dissatisfaction, no doubt about that. For example, a U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, USAP, Unihiga said that Trump's order is part of a sustained campaign to silence the Palestinian activists by equating opposition to Israel's treatment of Palestinians with anti-Semitism. Israel's apartheid is a very hard product to sell in America, especially in progressive circles. That's where a lot of Jewish people fear that, and the boycott against Israel, which is very popular in the EU and the rest of the world. Manaya's statements issued at times, realizing this, many Israeli apartheid apologists, Trump included, are looking to silence the debate as they can't win it. Well, no doubt about that. Progressive community, Bernie Sanders would be included in this. I would bring that out. This rights group slams Trump's anti-Semitic order. This is from Al Jazeera. Critics say the order violates free speech rights on college campuses, unfairly targets the BDS. During the Hanukkah reception that was at the White House, which effectively redefined Judaism as a race and nationality. The move, according to the administration, is aimed at combating rising anti-Semitism. The vile, hate-filled poison of anti-Semitism must be condemned and confronted. Well, he would know about that. And again, the use of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition and back to the prohibition there. So we're getting many views in this. Observers say the order will mainly target the boycott, divestiture, and sanction movement. That is the BDS movement, which criticizes Israeli policies against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip. The boycott movement has been criticized in Congress by prominent Republicans and Democrats, and many states have passed bipartisan anti-boycott measures in the form of requiring state contractors to sign pledges not to support it. But several of these laws have been stricken in the federal courts because they're unconstitutional. And going down here, Jay Steele, a Jewish liberal activist, said the order was an attempt by Trump to defend against accusations of anti-Semitism. It's particularly outrageous and absurd for this president to pretend to care about anti-Semitism during a week in which he once again publicly espoused anti-Semitic tropes about Jews and money. The same right-wing groups who turn a blind eye to the president's hateful rhetoric have promoted this executive order. No doubt about that. We call it a flippable. It is a partisan political weapon instead of a serious form to combat anything. So this is basically a collection, Al Jazeera and the Jerusalem Post basically there. And in final, as we close up here, Clint Eastwood has a new movie out, Richard Jewell. I remember Richard Jewell. He was a security guard at the Atlanta Olympics, and he found the bomb. And he immediately became a suspect through the tangle of police-type reporters and their close proximity to law enforcement, FBI, state and local. They have their quote-unquote sources that spread propaganda. Many times it is not factual. So Richard Jewell was an early victim of so-called fake news, and the Atlanta Constitution published this, and I remember looking at it live on CNN when they actually brought Richard Jewell on that night and interviewed him, a security guard. That's the one that, the old man, the one that finds it, gets it. And anyway, Clint Eastwood, now in his 80s, here, has a good picture of the people there. Kathy Bates is in it, for those who remember Kathy Bates. And Bobby Jewell is there, and Clint Eastwood is there, his mother. Mr. Jewell is now dead, but his mother is there. She's up there also. Clint Eastwood's latest project, he explores the frame story of Richard Jewell, the security guard celebrated as a life-saving hero and later accused of being the terrorist behind it. Deadly bombing of that was 1996, calling Jewell's story a great American tragedy. He told reporters, this is incidentally from the Hollywood Reporter, that Richard Jewell at the AFI world premiere on Wednesday, but he wanted to convey to the audience that we shouldn't jump to conclusions right away, and we should go back to the basis of innocent until proven guilty. This is not happening in a lot of situations nowadays, and it has happened here. Okay. And there's been some criticism here about the reporter involved. Now we'll get to that here. Reality is, this is a character-driven movie where there's a victim, and the victimization shouldn't be the thing it's about. It's across the board. It's a Hollywood Reporter. It's not black or it's white. It's not male or female. It happens to anyone. This is how it said. The film takes a hard look at Jewell's fall from grace, one day setting down on the Today Show and finding book deals, and the next finding himself under investigation by the FBI. Security guard is vilified by the press when he's found to be a suspect and accusing him of being responsible for the bombing by FBI agents who are looking to close the case with its dark look at journalism, and some viewers have interpreted it as a political message from Paul Walter Heiser, who stars as Jewell. Says people shouldn't get overly engulfed in it. He told a Hollywood Reporter what happened to Richard Jewell should be illuminated. It should be illuminated so people can see history is going to repeat itself if we don't take care of people in the situation. And they have a trailer here of it. We don't have it up here now, but the newspaper featured in the film, which employed somebody named Kathy Struggs. I remember reading about her, played by Olivia Wilde, is one on the scene. The Wilde's character is to get information about the bombing from the FBI agent named Tom Shaw. He offered sex in exchange for the scoop. The paper said there's no evidence this happened, and this plot line deflames the real life Struggs. Struggs died in 2001 of a overdose of barbiturates, I think. Anyway, any bio picture you watch from Ruby to Foxcatcher is all going to be artistic license, and we're making a film where you are filling in the gaps. Yeah, it is artistic, there's no doubt about that. They have to keep the audience in the cinema, and Clint Eastwood tells the story of this, many years trying to get it. In both cases, Kathy Struggs and Richard Jewell have since passed. Unfortunately, the star said in response, I think it is redemptive. There is an art, the Kathy Struggs character, and we humanize these people even if upset with them in the movie. Such a fan of Eastwood that he says he wouldn't work craft services on Eastwood's movie. Hauser continued the celebration inside the screening at the cinema. That's the Chinese theater there in Hollywood, where despite the director getting a standing ovation, there was not enough applause for Hauser's task. I just want to say it's not nearly as loud when the dude who made the unforgivable $1 Million Baby walked out. He teased the crowd, and that's Clint Eastwood. Before the screening, Eastwood spoke about the journey, revealing how he made the film 4 years ago, but it didn't happen. It was almost made it. It didn't happen because I was waiting for this cast. The director also brought Jewell's mother, Bobby Jewell, and the lawyer there, Jay Watson Bryant, on stage with the team hugging Bobby as he spoke. And you see a picture of Bobby Jewell here, and I believe we have the Eastwood picture here. And make sure we have this. Nonetheless, this will do it for us. And we'll see you on the Monday morning quarterback on the political side here. We also have a special episode, Amy Klobuchar at the Council on Foreign Affairs. She gave an address there this past week. We have it, and we'll make some commentary to it, reading from the script. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll see you on the Monday morning quarterback. Good day. And for many parts of the country, including in Colorado, where they have 2 feet of snow, and across the country where temperatures are getting below zero, stay warm.